Hello, Dude Mindfulness Collective. This right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. If you want to join us, if you're seeing this anywhere other than twitch.tv/deepmindfulness, will come on over. We'd love to have you here. Folks, what an exciting day. It's Wednesday as we're finding ourselves succumbing to the general shape of this particular moment. Folks, what is up? Where are you? Where are you coming from? Where do we find you? Hello from Brooklyn. Where are folks? Where are folks coming from? As we're beginning to gather ourselves here. Little meditation, little good times. Joel Groover, welcome from Atlanta. Lovely. I saw a concert in Atlanta on 4th of July once, a long time ago. Hello from Brooklyn. Good to see you. Jean. Tomalin, where are you joining us from? Yeah, where are folks? Where do folks find themselves in this particular moment? How is life? And how are things going? What's new? What's the news? What's the haps? What's going on today? Folks, pretty excited about today. I recently guided a meditation with a student, which was quite fun, around emptiness. And what we've talked about here is called what we call not this. And that's what we're going to be exploring today. Thought that would be a little bit of fun to get into that, how that relates to our experience of emotion, difficulties, challenges, these kind of things, and have a little bit of fun. So let's see. My cushion is rolling down the hill as we speak. Excellent. Okay, folks. So tell me where it is that you're coming from, and you get a prize. The prize is my understanding where the hell you're coming from, and a little bit of input. If folks. Hello, CL 2020, coming in from the UK. Good to see you here. It's been a few days. And if folks let me know anything that's coming up in their practice, any difficulties, challenges, interest, opportunities, this can help shape the practice that we actually do. So that is the general breakdown here. Let's see here. Excellent, folks are trickling in. And my wife has just returned from her orientation. She's getting her beginning orientation at her clinical psych placement internship, which is at an art school, which, interestingly, the school itself is 2 blocks away, but she's not attending in person because of COVID. So she's doing her training across the hallway in a space that we've rented. How's your orientation going? She says it's great. She's giving short answers.
Go back in 10 minutes.
She's got to go back in 10 short minutes. All right, well, then come on the live stream for 9 minutes. And,
Don't eat any food yet.
yeah, forget your breakfast. That's really not my priority here. That's not our priority. We're here for fun and entertainment and not to keep you fed. Excellent, folks. So, beep, up. What is up? Where are you coming from? We have Joel Groover joining us here. It says, I'm really appreciating the edges guidance in the Boundless Compassion Guided Meditation from the Shinsei course. Lovely. Well, it's interesting because I was about to teach that to this particular student that I'm describing, and I said, let's do this first. I think this is actually be a good precursor. So this is a little bit different of an order than what we're doing in the Shinsei class, but today's practice will be relevant, especially related to nama and rupa, name and form, the way the mind shapes and collects reality, creates a solid sense of self and world in this way. So, folks, very excited about the practice. So for the practice, I want to encourage everyone to find a way that they can hold the body still for the duration of the sit. We do this by arranging the body well, making sure the knees are lower than the hips. This might sound like a silly detail. Every class that I teach, so if I teach a class publicly, I'll say this and say, listen, if you're new, you got to make sure, however you stack the cushions, get in a chair, whatever, make sure your knees are lower than your hips. You will be uncomfortable in about 5 minutes if you don't do that. And there's always people who are like looking around like, no, this is good. And their knees are clearly either parallel to their hips or like at an angle. They're like, this is cool. I'm good. And you can't like stop a class and be like, hey, well, you could, I guess. But you're like, hey, you in particular, you're not doing the thing I just said. So I'm going to need you to change up your game. So if right now you're thinking and you're new in the meditation game and you're like, no, I'm good, I can have my legs be parallel, you can do whatever you want. And if you want to find a way to have the body be still for the duration of the practice, it's often wise to do what I tell you to do, god damn it. Just kidding. So folks, finding that nice comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. And ask, hey, wifey.
Yeah.
Could you crate the animal?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This microphone is incredibly sensitive. I just pointed it down towards my computer. Listen to this. I don't know if you can hear that. Really good noise cancellation on this microphone. That's some damn good. If it can hear that loudly when it's pointed at it, but not now, that's actually a very good sign. So finding that nice comfortable position. And when you're ready, we will begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths and feeling the body rise and fall. Allowing the eyes to either close or letting the eyes rest on a single point. If we'd like to practice with the eyes open. And beginning by settling the body, finding a posture we can maintain for the duration of the practice. Beginning by relaxing the body physically. Relaxing down all the way to the bone, the place where the muscle and the bone connect. Releasing or relaxing any microtensions, even if we can't physically detect them. Knowing that we have the capacity to relax the body more deeply than we can even feel. Beginning by feeling the overall experience of the body. Not any particular sensation, but all of the body sensations in one large category. And then allowing the mind to detect any particular sensation. So noticing any particular sensation in the body. For instance, if the mind is drawn to the sensations of the left hand, just letting those sensations be in the foreground. Once again, letting those sensations be noticed among all of the other sensations. So we allow awareness to experience the overall body. And occasionally the mind will be drawn into a particular sensation, and that's not a problem. We allow that, and then slowly feed back in all of the other sensations, letting the context return. We're going to keep this same process going, but we're going to engage with some attention in relationship to the breath. So noticing the body breathing, the details of this. And then letting those details be known among all of the other body's sensations. So letting the detail of the breath arise, be present, come to the foreground. And then knowing that data, that breath experience in the context of all of the body sensations, holding the two in one large field, one large awareness. And without forcing our experience, seeing how we can arrange the mind, arrange our attention and awareness in such a way to develop continuity, unbroken consciousness of this particular moment. But of course, this can be a bit of a challenge at times, and that's not a problem. We don't need to fight any agitation in the mind or any way that we're being pulled away. Simply letting agitation arise or any turbulence arise and simply coming back. Sensations of the breath, sensations of the body. Noticing how solid and present the sensations of the body appear to the mind. The mind is very good has a tendency to experience the world as quite solid, continuous. The mind is also very good at being contrary. So experiencing the sensations of the breath, the body, with the mind, we're going to label these experiences. And saying to our experience, these are very solid, these are very stable. So we're actually either using words in the mind, if that's helpful, or just playing up, allowing that part of the mind that says our experience is very stable in this particular moment. This is very stable. This is very solid. And because the mind is very good at being contrary, as we insist that our experience is very solid, the mind will begin to show us something else in our periphery. So focusing on the solidity of the body. Noticing what the mind shows us. And it may be the case, or it may not, that the mind will show us the spaciousness around the solidity, the emptiness that the solidity requires in order for it to have that sense of compact, stable presence. So if we look for the stability, but allow for the other things the mind shows us, we start to get a more full picture. And we can broaden this process to include our overall experience at this particular moment. This moment feels quite solid and stable. There's a self experiencing it, an observer perhaps. And in order to keep us feeling stable, the mind will tell us that all of this is very solid, something we can rely on. So the process is simply to double down on this mental tendency, this belief, yes, this is entirely solid. My current experience of self, the observer, the body, my sense of space, my surroundings. Yes, I agree, this is very solid. There's no softness or emptiness. Because the mind is very good at noticing contrast. As we hone in on that which seems extremely stable and solid, reinvesting consciously in this solidity. This is something that goes on in the background, so doing so consciously can begin to show us some of the makeup of our experience. Things begin to clarify. Some things seem as solid as we might ordinarily experience them, but others can feel as though they're shot through with a kind of emptiness, spaciousness. And this holds true for any experience of self, any part of us that feels very solid. Tuning into this using our overly emphatic statement or way of relating to it. This is very solid, very stable. Looking for evidence of this experience and noticing what arises. Because we're using this very self-assured voice, this voice of overconfidence, this can feel slightly alienating. It's like a bossy drill sergeant. So let's introduce a bit of the kind awareness. So no need to produce a lot of emotion, just holding a sense of our current experience with this gentle welcoming, noticing what effect that might have. Noticing if it's relieving, if it's neutral, if it's unpleasant. Adding this welcoming and seeing what effect it has on our experience. We can let go of this self-assured voice looking for solidity. And we can allow our compassionate voice, if we'd like, to say something like, I see you. I see you. Whether we're referring to the sense of solidity, any sense of emptiness, just seeing, welcoming, with all of its richness. In the same way that a bully exerts their toughness to compensate for a deep fear that they're vulnerable, the mind will exert the solidity of the world. Often because it's afraid that the spaciousness, the emptiness will be scary or unstable. And the kind awareness can show us how to navigate these two polarities. Our sense of stability is kindly welcomed. The void in the emptiness is kindly welcomed. I see you. I see you. I see you. The kindness doesn't need things to be different. It sees the system, the body-mind needing solidity or wanting it, and says, that's fine. I see your need. It sees the part of us that wants and craves for spacious freedom. I see you. It sees the tension that sometimes arises between the two. One part of us seeking freedom, one part of us seeking safety. I see you. So staying with the practice, staying in stillness, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. And often when the eyes open, the system is so used to its ordinary life that it will let go of the practice, immediately moving the body or jumping into some kind of action. So noticing if this impulse arises or if the body even succumbs to this impulse. It's not a problem. I see you. So we'll end the formal practice when the bell goes silent. Letting this particular moment, letting this be the great teacher that shows us how we might bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay. So making any adjustments you need to allow the body to be comfortable. Excellent. So one of the central ways that we can have a deeper meditation practice is by explaining our current experience. the experience of the practice, what happened, what it's like, its effect on our current moment experiencing. And we can do that through type, or we can do that through through voice. So let me put the Zoom link in there. If you want to jump on the Zoom, let me know, because it interferes with the cameras if we just open it. So, what was that like? What happened, and what are you like now? And Tomlin, thank you for reminding folks that we have a Discord. This is where we chit-chat like kitty cats when we're not on live stream. Excellent. Yeah, so what was that experience like? Challenges, difficulties, interest, opportunities as they arose. It was fun for me. It's often hard. Okay, so this is what happens with people when they have challenges to write a report. For me, this is what happens for me, is that the system is often quite ethereal, or sort of softly experiencing the world, and then we sort of come back and we're like, okay, wait, I gotta not only organize experientially, but then organize myself in terms of writing a report, this kind of thing. What I want to let folks know is that you don't actually have to reorganize. You can just let the system do it on its own, and see what comes out. And that's often a way to start to train the system that it can hang out in that kind of space, and it doesn't have to get solid. It's a training. It takes time. So Joel Grover says, I like the way you pointed out the possibility of bringing kind awareness to the part of you that needs spacious freedom. Yeah, and I think that that's part of the premise, especially of the kind awareness, is that the kind awareness doesn't need us to be different, which is so much of our experience of the world is, us wanting reality to be different, wanting us to be different. I'm ambitious and I want to get these things done, and reality isn't the way I like it, and so I'm going to push and pull on reality, and that's going to be the shape of things. That's fine, and that's a fine way to relate to the world at certain times. But if we can't get out of that gravitational pull, and we're just always wanting and craving and that kind of thing, it's more of a prison than it is a sort of path to freedom. And part of us wants spacious, open, transformational experiences, this kind of thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a bad impulse, but we don't want that impulse to be unconsciously pushing and pulling us in ways that don't really fit with our values in that way. Okay. Jean says, physically moved a bit at first, trying to straighten my spine. I did a shoulder roll, still trying to notice if this is just muscle tension or somatically held emotion. I was suddenly able to sit very still when we brought the kind awareness. So I noticed that too. So I wasn't planning on going that direction, but what I found was that exact drill sergeant sort of feeling is like the mind already tends to be like, no, it's like reality has to be like this. It's like everything's solid and there's solid inside and outside, and it's sort of always managing these things, and we're doubling down on that tendency, just as a way to sort of show its artifice. It's like a way of like, calling the bluff, basically. But what I found in that was the same tension that arises with the sort of that tendency of the mind, which is like really trying to control things, came a kind of harshness. And I was like, yeah, this isn't where I want to land. So I thought that kind of awareness would be really important to bring in there as a portion of that. So suddenly able to stay still, which makes sense, right? Because there's a lot less of the system fighting itself internally in that way. Beep, up, up, up. Kind of awareness. It was a very pleasurable feeling, to direct that kind of awareness towards both freedom and the need for safety. Yeah, and it's a little bit like two kids fighting and not knowing each other. And if this is the sort of paradox of a lot of this material. If we really want freedom, it's to look at the part of ourselves that's afraid of that freedom and really deeply accept it. And if we really want to have a nice, functional, stable life and have stability in our world. It's to look at the part of us that really is afraid to let go, is afraid to open up, and look at the part of us that wants to open up and say, yeah, I accept you, I see you, you're fine just the way you are. So lovely, I'm glad that was helpful. And we can also talk about, Gene, how do you tell if something's somatically held emotion? It's a bit of a flavor you can look for, and over time you can get pretty clear on that. Rory says, I noticed that my body, I think this is my body, seemed less solid in the sense that while parts of my body were kind of solid, others felt like a guess as to being present. Definitely not a uniform sense of solidness. Yeah, and that's the whole thing about calling the bluff. The mind's like, no, my body's very solid. Let's not talk about it anymore. It's like it very confidently states, like, no, reality's solid. That's how it is. That's how I experience reality. Let's play a video game, or like, let's go watch a show. Like, we don't want to. Like, we've looked at this, and the mind is just like, I'm done. And then if we look at it closely at all, we start to see that this is in fact not always the case. So we're using that bluff calling process in order to see the man under the curtain, so to speak. Annie, good to see you here. Annie says, I thought a lot about solid versus liquid. I found a craving towards a more liquid experience. Okay, great. So the fact that you found a craving is really excellent, because what that is it's a bit of unconsciousness. I have heard you talk about it before, and today a lot of sensations. Hello, upstairs neighbor. What is that about? That's some serious banging. That's impressive. Okay. Heard you talk about it before. A lot of sense came up around the show movement of my practice, the slow movement of my practice. So partially what you're talking about is the sort of impulse and desire for progress, for the system to grow, and for the system to, experience things, often the things that we've read about in these ways. And I think that this is something we've described recently, is that our current experience is the doorway to transcendent material, not some future experience. And I think that it's this particular practice where we look at where in this case, this is sort of an entryway into emptiness, an entryway into the sort of rupa nature of our sensing experience. So, beep up is that to look at that currently and just show the system that live over and over and over and over again. And especially, like you said, noticing the part of us that is wanting something else and just treating that like anything else. Okay, this part of me that wants to move forward, or wants to get to some place, or wants to achieve or have or whatever, that part's not bad. It's just more nama and rupa. It's just more of the system trying to organize our experience into this current moment, future moment, yes, and like craving and pushing and pulling and trying to sort of manhandle our experience in that way. So noticing that now is really sort of our real doorway to that kind of freedom. And also, freedom is not just the sort of transcendent material. Freedom is also the freedom from not needing that transcendent material. Right? That's the that's one of the big hits, is that people say, there's a tendency in the system, if it's not regulated, to treat freedom, or to think that freedom is getting what we want. If I get what I want, I'll find things will be good. I'll get the car, I'll get the new phone, if I just get what I want, I'll feel good. I'll be freer, or feel better. And of course, we know that tendency is quite flawed. It doesn't really work. It actually leaves us being like a kind of prisoner to wanting. This is the classic, truism that wanting doesn't care if we're happy, it just wants. So part of what we're leaning towards is that there's a teaching the system that there's no need. So part of that is that there's no need for awakening. And so by observing the part of us that seems to like, I need this escape, I need it, is to let it need that without trying to change it. And observing, yes, I see you reaching. Totally. We can ask a question that gives us more perspective. How do I feel about that part? that needs that? How do I relate to that part? Which gives us a little, what's in psychology is called mentalizing. It gives us a little space around it to think about the thinking, to think about the tendency, to think about the impulse or drive or belief, rather than being in the belief. So yeah, we're just developing more context in order to make those experiences less sticky, so to speak. Let's see. I tried to sink in more, Annie's still saying, I tried to sink in more to the moment. Opening my eyes helped. Excellent. Okay. Very wonderful. And, the key is not to wait till the next meditation, but to wait till this particular moment. Notice the part of the mind that experiences this particular moment as, something about this should change. Something should be different. There can be this like underlying sour flavor. There's something. What's the next thing? It can look for flaws in our environment, or like something is off. Something's off. To notice that, and in this case, we're talking about this sort of solidity. To notice how solid that is, and all of the emptiness that's required for that to exist. And so, okay, this is going to be a little bit of a sidetrack here. And this is where it gets very theoretical. If we can start to teach the system, the body-mind, to show us the following, we can have a lot of freedom. So the following, what I'm describing, is having the system show us the solidity of objects, and having that solidity this is why it gets really tricky. The solidity of the object be our path to see and experience emptiness. This is what I describe as not this. So there's a thisness of this object. It's very sort of stable. It's like, yep, I got it. It's very stable in this way. But it's has a gravitational force. It's sort of like a vacuum. It sort of sucks in and is like, okay, this is very solid. And one of the things we can do, one of the ways we can approach emptiness, is to see what is it pulling from? Like, what is all of this material around it that isn't so stable, that isn't so solid, that makes it clearly have its nice defined edge. And what that's doing is we're opening up awareness to a larger context. Lately, this is something I've had for a long time, is that there'll be things that'll wake me up at night. Suddenly the system will be like, you forgot the thing, or what about that time? This sort of thing, pumped with adrenaline. Basically, the system is just, from trauma, etc., is like, something is wrong. Like, you need to attend to this right now. And what I've been doing is noticing the relative solidity of that. Like, it's a gravitational pull. My mind wants to really stick to it and start to try to sense, like, what is it pulling from? Like, what is the outside that is not there, that's creating this sort of sense of solidity here? And what it does is, rather than ignoring this and saying, okay, I'm just going to make my mind bigger, make awareness bigger, which feels like a fight, I'm just paying attention to what is the experience of it pulling in from. What is the universe of material, of sort of a sense of something larger, the emptiness that it's pulling from, and suddenly there becomes this much softer relationship to it. So I wanted to share that with you in particular, Annie, because the sense of solidity, I need to move forward, I need to whatever, to sense that as a solid experience, and that it's like a gravity. And so what is the atmosphere around it that it's pulling from, sort of lightly, what is its doppelganger, its opposite, its antimatter, in that way. So hopefully that makes sense. We're getting into some pretty weird territory. It's hard to describe in language, but I appreciate the opportunity to try to explain it. CL 2020 says, it was wonderful to experience the system as vibrating molecules when it was suggested that it was solid. Thank you. Well, thank you. That's sort of like the trick, is that the system often looks for the opposite. So if we say, look for movement and change and flowing activity and dynamics, the system will often be like, no, no, thank you. I'm going to show you the opposite of that. Or it'll show us some, but it'll keep, we'll have a bunch of turbulence between the two. So in this case, we just sort of go with the mind's tendency and then have it show us the rest of this material. Your response to Jean, spelling SP, I think it's Jean. I would love to talk more about how to tell if emotions are somatically held. Excellent. Okay, great. That's a great question. So I'm going to go through my usual spiel here and indicate to the team that this is a topic. So somatically held emotion. So emotion, generally, if we can get good at detecting it, emotion tends to happen on the surface of the body and is very light and effervescent. So often you've heard me do exercises where I'll say, relax the body, make sure you relax, because people get confused. And imagine something is on the side of you, next to you. It could be any emotion that you choose. It could be, humorous. It could be awe-inspiring. It could be, whatever it is. And just really clearly imagine it. Turn up the amplitude, like get it really intense. Turn it up again, and just get it really intense. And then stop paying attention and just pay attention to the left side and the right side of the body and notice any difference. Sometimes one side feels warmer or more active. One side feels more neutral. And it's starting to notice that material that we start to realize, okay, this is emotion in the body. This difference is actually emotion. That's the body sensation of emotion. Detecting present moment emotion is very helpful because then we can start to say, okay, well, this is an emotion, but is it present moment? Present moment emotion tends to be light and effervescent. It moves pretty fluidly, and it tends to express itself in the direction that the thing is being experienced. So if I'm experiencing something in front of me, I tend to experience the emotion here, which is most of the time we experience our emotion here because, our eyes are aligned this way and we're typically facing forward. That's why I like to do this thing on one side, because it shows itself in a more distinct way than if we imagine it just in front of us. So it tends to be light and effervescent, and it tends to come and go relatively quickly. So I could show, it didn't take too long, I could show a really adorable image on the screen, but you can just put one in your mind. So imagine a big, cute, doughy-eyed, entity that's really cute and adorable, and it's like a double-handed eating a super teeny tiny carrot and whatever. Things that are sort of really adorable, right? That's very cute. It's very sweet. I have a little bubbly sense of how cute that is in my mind. Maybe some people, the mind shows them the contrast and they're just annoyed or frustrated at this cute little animal, however that works. But those emotions will fade relatively quickly. In a minute or so, it's going to be hard to detect that unless we're referring back to that over and over again. So those are present moment emotions. Old emotions are different, and they're actually, once we get used to them, are quite easy to detect, but we want to be very careful. Old emotions are more contractive in nature. They tend to feel more like a tightening, like a Charlie horse or a cramp or this kind of thing. They also tend to organize around the central meridian of the body, the throat, chest, belly, this kind of thing, but they can be anywhere in the body. They don't have to be localized there. They're also extremely stable over time. So notice as I'm talking about this, what arises, and if the system starts to get a little squirrely, because it will tend to when we talk about overwhelming emotion. So you can imagine a time when you were, let's say, at a family gathering or something like this, a holiday or something like this, and it was intense, and it's just this sort of thing. We can imagine, where would I detect that in my body? Where would that thing be that I was just that thing my mom said? Or maybe we don't have a mom, or we have there's a gap in this story, and there's this sort of sense of something missing, or sort of tight, or sort of something in our chest. This is, these are sort of more visceral emotions that the body will hold a little bit deeper in the body. So looking for where those are, and you might just know where those are from having experience in the past. Maybe you don't need to imagine anything. Okay, I have this certain experience and it happens here. What often happens if we look in that area where we've detected it in the past, and I'm not suggesting you do, because if you can detect that easily, it can be overwhelming. But if we can't detect it, we're still looking and sort of learning what it is. We can look for an absence. It's not even there's sort of not much emotion there. It's there's a hole. There's a black hole. And part of what that is the body and the mind collapsing emotion down so far that it's blacked out. It's what do they call that when people have a traumatic experience and they have a gap in their experiencing? Somebody tell me in the chat, because I completely forget what that's called. Someone blacks out. No, blackout is from drinking. Anyway, suppressed memory, I guess. So it's like an absence there. And as we begin to unfold that experience and get more sensitivity as to what that is, it starts to come out or be more prevalent in our lives. The problem with really somatically held emotion is that for our safety, the system has said this is too dangerous to feel, or this part of us is no, it's too dangerous to feel, we've got to collapse this down. So there's a kind of reverse Skinnerian challenge here, because typically with most meditation experiences, if you attend to them very closely, they will disintegrate, just like we did today, right? It's very solid. I look at it, poof, it's not that. It's actually very spacious and open and this kind of thing. However, old emotion can be very different, where we attend to it, especially if we use attention rather than awareness, right? If we're attending to this emotion, it can be a tendency that it'll collapse down and become more and more intense and painful. And I made the mistake at some point was to just spend years just focusing on old emotion, just like focusing, trying to do the same sort of masculine, penetrative, like I'm going to just plow into it. And then I found I sort of don't want to meditate. And I also don't want to meditate like last month. I still don't want to meditate. And actually the last 6 months, I really don't want to meditate. And the system was so shocked from the intensity of that I couldn't get myself to meditate. And so I'm talking about years ago. And now when I have challenges meditating, I realize it is the system being like, I don't really want to face this stuff. This is really challenging. So we have to be extremely skillful on how we interact with this. And generally, we're trying to experience it very, very carefully, very gently, very subtly. And that's actually very fruitful, because it still allows the sensation to be there, but it doesn't allow it to necessarily flood. And so in somatic experiencing, they have this idea called titration, where you're just adding, in chemistry, if you add two chemicals together, it can just create an explosion. But if you add one of the chemicals very, very slowly and judiciously to the other chemical, you can slowly find a mixture between the two. And so that's called titration. So we're just doing a touch of it, a touch of it, a touch of it. And it could feel like it's, oh, that's too slow. I want to get through this material much more quickly. Well, the answer, there are ways to sort of accelerate the process, but we also want to respect that if we try to go too fast, it's going to take longer. So this is definitely an example of where, fast is slow and slow is fast. Generally, the general thing that I am going to recommend is more context. So holding it in a larger awareness, holding that awareness with kindness, having a more zoomed out view rather than pushing down with our attention, actually sort of almost pulling out and saying what would this sensation feel like if it were in my fingertips, and letting it pull from the center and letting that part, sort of unfold. That said, I talked about things that accelerate the process. I've found in my experience a few things that accelerate the process, one of which is various forms of therapy. Now, if you're interested in this material, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is excellent and talks about this material pretty directly, and catalogs a number of the therapies that are known to support breaking through this material. Therapies that I've used, EMDR, which is it's used to have to do with eye movement, but now they realize it's just bilateral stimulation. And so I do this because this is often what you end up doing. You're tapping on left side, right side, left side, right side. And what that does is the solidity of the sort of synapses gets shaken. It shakes the snow globe. So you can begin to shake those old patterns of this is, my mind always does this. When I get to this thing, it moves to overwhelm. You can break those down. Somatic experiencing, where you're very carefully, sort of experiencing the emotion. I do this because a lot of it is actually you have your hand on wherever the emotion is experienced. And I've been thinking about these different I've been doing these different meditations, which have been interesting, which is to hold the hands as though they're this big container, and the edge of that container, the edge of that is where it is touching the emotion. But you want to hold all of the space, because what's going to happen is the mind will be pulled into the gravitational force of that sensation, because it's intense and it's contractive. So it tends to pull us into it once we sort of have contact. So to hold awareness outwards and to hold it as a larger space is one thing. We can do that in any form we want, have a sort of larger space. Raquel recently has been experimenting with a kind of a jhana practice where there's a sort of large sphere around you and you get settled into that, and then you introduce into that the emotion. So there's just this large space for it to play around in. Other things that accelerate the process, I've been doing the MAPS protocol, the psychedelically assisted therapy protocol. That does help in part because you just get, there's a substance and a medicine, and that medicine helps you really go into that experience very intensely. But it also, the other side of MAPS is that you can't do the sessions very often. Like you can't do one a week or something like that. They won't allow that. So a lot of the rest of the time is integrating that material. So it's actually, that's where a lot of the work gets done. You have contact at that point, but you don't actually get a ton of work necessarily done. The rest of the time is integrating this into our lives. Other things that help accelerate the process: doing movement practice. So doing physical activity with a bit of awareness on that emotion is often very powerful, because it's actually physically jiggling the body and letting that emotion move around. That can be very powerful. And there's one other that I was thinking about that can tend to accelerate the process. This is one that is very weird, and it's one of those places where I'm like, I wish this wasn't my experience, because it seems sort of mystical schmystical, and I usually go in the opposite direction. But it is the case that I've actually had 2 different sessions of Reiki where it was very clearly affecting that emotion. I've had years to get very clear on the density of the emotion and sort of its tendency, how it moves, and sort of how it's shaped, and these kind of things. And I had one particular Reiki session with a woman who's very, very skilled Shinzen practitioner. Her name escapes me right now. Rory, if you're here listening, you know that she's a Reiki practitioner who sits at the front of the retreat in Niagara and is like a rock. So let me remind me what her name is if you're here still. Did a Reiki session with her, and I could just feel this person very actively moving the emotion in the body without actually even physically touching the body. I think they don't actually have contact, this person. And surprisingly, that really worked. And I had another one done when I was in Burma by a Chinese gentleman that was very powerful also. So Reiki actually worked. So those seem like that might seem a little strange, but all of those are ways to potentially accelerate the process. But I just want to be very clear that this process is, we want to look at 5 years, 7 years, a decade. It's a slow process, and that can be hard to hear, because it can be like, oh my God, that seems impossible, that kind of thing. But it really, really, really does work. And so much of our energy is spent managing these emotions, managing to keep this stuff contained, that as we begin to move through, as we begin to shed these sort of layers of a need to hold this material down, it frees up so much energy in the system that we can have more and more capacity in life. And one reason why I've actually dug in so heavily with this material is that I see things that I want to do. I see, okay, I'm X age. I see, I see that I'm not going to be able to live here forever, and I want to have, I want to accomplish more or contribute more to the world. And I see the main thing that's standing in the way is this emotion. So part of the process is to find ways to feel the emotion safely with other people. Another thing that dramatically speeds up the process is, of course, all of the general things like therapy, but also just friendship and people that we can be around and sort of be with the emotion and talk and sort of have these interactions. Friendship is incredibly powerful in that way. And so to basically create a larger context for those experiences, and over and over and over again teach the system that it's safe. Also, if we're looking at it from a multiple parts perspective, looking at which parts rely on those different emotions in order to sort of make up their reality. Because the emotion often is not actually even, it doesn't belong to any particular self within us, any particular part. It can often just be its own independent sort of organic thing in the body physically. So those are a few strategies that one might use to navigate old emotion, or begin to detect old emotion. And that's the general breakdown. So hopefully that was fun and interesting. And if it was, let me know. I'd love to hear your personal experience. So excellent. Any other questions or remarks before we slide our way into the darkness here? Joel says a fugue state. It's something simpler than that. I think it just might be suppressed memory. I think that might be just all I'm talking about. Excellent, folks. Okay. So unless there are further questions, I'm going to make a wish for all of us. So folks, here's my simple wish for you, that in this particular moment you can look around, experience your world, experience the sense of this continuing reality that we have here, and notice that our system will tend to crave for two things. It'll tend to crave for more of reality. It wants more of this. It wants more excitement or fun or endorphins or these kind of things. And it can want the opposite of this. It can want the absence or the disappearance of this. It wants freedom from this, right? So the mind and system can push in these different directions. So this moment, just to simply notice that the system might be pushing or pulling in any of these directions, or it might be neutral. To notice all of that as it's appearing. And just a great thanks to everyone. Thank you, Annie and Joel, and 2020 CL, Rory and Jean, everybody, Tomalin, everyone who's made this stream possible. Thank you so much. So in this particular moment, here's what I'm going to wish. My wish for you is simply to allow and experience that solidity and the pushing and pulling of the makeup of our current moment. All of the things that brought us to this experiential place. And welcome those. Welcome the parts of us that can't welcome those. Enjoy the poetry and the lyrical, playful nature of our current experience, all the humor, all the antics that our body-mind puts us through, just to enjoy that just a little bit. And to have that be a path by which we can bring this into our daily lives. And of course we'll be back here in fewer than 48 hours. So I just wish for you that you have consciousness, have a connection, have some degree of allowing your experience, whatever that is, some degree of compassion for how challenging this life is at times, understanding in that way. And as always, practice well, take care of each other, have fun, and we'll see you all very, very soon.